Imagine a world where men stepped up and answered God's call to reach their full potential. Imagine a world where men put their faith and trust in God unwaveringly and without qualification. Imagine a world where men lived out God's purpose for them in everything they do. It's Not My Credit to Take explores the awe and wonder of how God shows up in the lives of strong, principled Christian men from all walks of life. Get ready to laugh, to cry, and to be transformed. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Slover, faithful husband, loving father, loyal friend, and unapologetically Christian. Welcome to the It's Not My Credit to Take podcast.
Alan Smyth, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I am as well. And for those of you not watching this on YouTube, he's got some movie posters behind him. I can make out Gladiator. That's one of my all-time favorites. And a Few Good Men. Oh, there's Rocky and Braveheart. Oh, yeah. Alan, you're rocking the movie posters.
Oh, yeah. This is, it was my daughter's bedroom. It's kind of a little bigger kind of bonus room feel. And then when she went away to college, that was the cue for my son and I to turn it into a movie room and a video game room. So we put up all the posters that we liked.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My guest today is Alan Smyth. I was first introduced to Alan by John McClernand, who's the host of the Between the Before and After podcast, where Alan was a guest, and he graciously agreed to have this conversation. Today, Alan serves as the executive director for Saving Innocence, an anti-human trafficking community-based organization focused on the recovery and restoration of child victims of sex trafficking. In 2021, he co-authored Men Fight for Me, the Role of Authentic Masculinity in Ending Sexual Exploitation and Trafficking, with Jessica Midkiff, a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation for 10 years, as well as having spent over 10 years of advocacy work helping victims escape and recover. She, along with other survivors of what is simply put pure evil, is nothing short of inspirational. Prior to this work, Alan served for 35 years in multiple roles for the Christian organization Young Life, and he's been married to his wife for 39 years, and they have 2 kids. Alan, thanks so much for taking time for the It's Not My Credit to Take podcast.
Thank you, Ed. It's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Yeah, your book really resonated with me, and I know you and I have been in communication subsequent to me finishing the book, and I'm holding it up for those of you on watching this on YouTube. It was heavy. It was absolutely heavy content. I know I shared with you I could only digest a half a chapter, maybe a full chapter at a time. So I can only imagine that it's resonating with the readers the way it's resonating with me.
Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. And I appreciate you pushing your way through it and reading it. That's what we need. We need everyone to be aware of this issue of human trafficking. And as I'm sure we'll get into the subset of men, we need all men to read this book. I can humbly say that any proceeds are going to the survivors that are in the book. And so I would hope that every man would buy this book for themselves and all the men that they know, because it's important. It's an important awakening, a wake-up call, if you will, I think, for men.
Well, it absolutely woke me up. I knew that there was commercial sexual exploitation. I knew there was human trafficking. It was one of those, I was willfully ignorant. And after having read your book, I've taken steps to actually join mentor teams at an organization here in Arizona called Phoenix Dream Center. So hopefully that goes well. My wife is interested in participating as well. So just figuring out different ways to serve, to end this. And as I mentioned in the opening, just it's pure evil.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up serving at Saving Innocence.
Well, I live in Los Angeles. I don't know if you said that earlier, but moved here in 2001, and for the next 16 years served in Young Life, which you mentioned. And in the last year of me working for Young Life, I came across this organization called Saving Innocence. One of the staff ladies here with us on Young Life staff got to know Saving Innocence at that time, which just been around for a few years. And she said, we have to do Young Life inside of Saving Innocence. I said, what does that mean? And she said, they work with child victims of sex trafficking. I said, well, what are they in Thailand? I don't get it. No, they're right here. U.S. born American citizens, kids here in our communities are being trafficked for sex. I was confused by that, like most people still today. And then that kind of went away and she moved. It never left my mind. Then a year later, after 25 years on the Young Life staff, I stepped away. It was time to move. And looking back, I can see God's fingerprints on it. He was moving the chess pieces of my life around. I stepped away from Young Life, not knowing what I was going to do next, without a plan. I just knew it was time to leave. And I never got Saving Innocence out of my mind. And so I cold called the founder, cold texted, if you will. We met, heard the 2-hour story on a 1-hour parking meter. So I got a parking ticket on my first exposure to Saving Innocence outside. And I was in immediately. It wasn't a job interview. They didn't have any money. They were just getting started, really. I wasn't there looking for a job. I was just there. I had a little free time and I wanted to understand what this thing was. And I drove away thinking I have to be part of this. And we kept talking and it turned into them a couple months later offering me a job to join the team.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong. You actually heard a survivor talk about her experience and make mention that there wasn't anyone that came to fight for her. Right? Can you describe that experience?
Yeah, that was really a significant moment. You know, when it's all said and done, I'm looking back over my life. That'll be one of the significant moments in my life. I was already with Saving Innocence. So I'd already made the decision. I was already in, although I was trying to figure it all out. I didn't understand all the pieces yet, but I understood enough to know that I need to be part of this. And I might have some unique experiences and gifts that I can bring to the party. So I was looking forward to that. Well, early on, I went to this awareness event on a church on a Saturday in LA. And a couple of our staff members were on a panel on the stage, and another woman named Rachel was sitting in between them. She was a survivor of trafficking, went away to college, came from a great home and a great family, and was approached by a fraudulent modeling talent agency, signed her up. Her story, she tells her story in the book, chapter 3. Everyone get the book and you can read her in her voice, tell them what happened. But the point that you're asking about that gripped me, she was on the stage, I was in the audience, and she said, for the first 5 months, I was trying to figure out a way of escape, trying to get out. And I found out there was no way of escape. So I gave up. And she said, I could no longer fight for myself. I needed someone to fight for me. And that's the line. That's where the title of the book comes from. For the longest time, the title just called Fight for Me, based around that statement. And then our book editor consultant said, why don't you add the word men to it? Because we're trying to get the attention of men. Women are reading it and really enjoying it as well. But we do target the male audience for the obvious reasons we'll talk about, I'm sure. And so here's my lane. I'm a man. There aren't that many men involved in the good side of this fight. Most of the men, most of the images of masculinity, of manhood that people inside this fight see are all horribly negative and hurtful. I'm a man. I have a voice. I'm now behind the curtain. I'm working at Saving Innocence. I'm seeing things that other men aren't seeing. And I have a survivor on the stage saying, I needed someone to fight for me. And you already mentioned the movie posters in my room with Gladiator and Rocky and Braveheart. There's something in my DNA, and I think, frankly, most men's DNA, that we're looking for a battle bigger than ourselves. And this is it. This is my battle. I needed someone to fight for me. And so I'll fight for you and you and you and you. And I'm going to see how many good men I can get to fight with me. And that became the inspiration for the book and really the rest of my days in what I'm doing as a vocation.
It's so good. I just, for the sake of saying it out loud, I have goosebumps with everything that you just said. I don't know if that's Holy Spirit, getting my attention that I'm now going to be part of the fight that you're part of. In reading your book and you're with your co-author Jessica, it as I mentioned earlier, it was quite sobering. And I captured a quote that just really really resonated with me. And you wrote, if we don't take this crime personally, it won't be taken seriously.
Right.
Why do you believe more people, particularly men, aren't taking human trafficking and sexual exploitation either personally or seriously?
I think it's because there's a couple different reasons, but I think the main reason is it hasn't yet come close enough to them to experience it, to take it personally. Like, they don't know anyone personally that has been trafficked. It hasn't happened to their daughter or their friend's daughter or their niece. So they're not taking it personally. And so therefore we don't take it seriously. They think it's 10,000 miles away. They think it's in Thailand and Cambodia and something like that. And it is. They don't understand. And my message to everyone is it's bigger than you think and it's closer than you think. And, when Rachel said, I needed someone to fight for me, that awoken something in me that was already active, but I'll fight for you. I take that personally. And I do have a daughter. There are little boys that are trafficked, but I do have a daughter. And I think this whole thing hits differently for dads who have daughters. You don't have to be a dad and you don't have to have a daughter to care about this. But dads who have daughters, I think it scratches at another place. And I have a heart for young girls who have been abused by men, and that angers me. And I can be part of changing that narrative. I can be part of changing the circumstances, but then I can also be part of changing that narrative. And so I just take that as my responsibility. I'm supposed to do this. Now, everyone doesn't feel it that way. I wish they would, but they don't. And everyone's on their own timeline. Okay. I don't take this personally because it happened to someone in my family. I take it personally because this is a child of God that's being abused in horrific ways that are unmentionable. And I'm just not okay with that. You can see it playing out. It's not being taken seriously in every location, in every geography. There are mayors, there are district attorneys, there are governors that aren't taking this crime seriously. They're dismantling some laws that are helpful in the prosecution. They are not allocating resources enough. And that tells me they're not taking it personally. And I absolutely don't want it to happen to another person. But I fear the only thing that's going to get those people's attention is if it happens to their own daughter or someone they care about and love. I bet they will change. I bet they'll take it more seriously. And I hope they can take it seriously without that happening. But I think that's the reality.
Yeah, you're right. Being a dad of two daughters, it hits you differently. It absolutely does. And you referenced that this is bigger than we think. It's in every town, it's city, it's throughout. What are within the United States, what are the stated statistics currently for victims that are caught in the quote life of commercial sexual exploitation and trafficking?
Yeah, the disclaimer up front is it's a hard crime to really count and have great statistics on. There's going to be differing statistics because it exists in the shadows. It's not like a bank robbery. You know exactly how many bank robberies were in Arizona last year. There's a physical location. The police were called. There's an address. There's footage, security footage. They know how many banks that were robbed or 7-Elevens or something. This is different. It's in the shadows. The numbers that most people agree upon is that here in the United States, there's at least 300,000 children, minors, being trafficked for sex on a regular basis in our country. We did some work with the state of Texas about 4 years ago. They came, the governor of Texas sent his lieutenants to LA because they heard that we had something, that there was a model here in LA with our partners in Saving Innocence that was making great progress. So he said, go find out what they're doing. And they sat in our office on the couch and they said that they determined that they had roughly 90,000 child victims in the state of Texas amongst their cities. So you start doing that math. That's 90,000 in one state. It doesn't take very long before you start adding up all the other states where there's a lot of population. 300,000, you get there pretty quickly and pretty easily. We were part of a campaign in LA County a few years ago, and LA County was saying that there was 10,000 in LA County. So that's somewhere around the number. I would make note that most of those are U.S. born American citizens. There's kids in our communities and our schools. There's certainly people being trafficked over the borders, particularly our southern border of our country, that are coming in that are being trafficked. So those numbers might change, in the days and years to come. Globally, IJM, International Justice Mission, put out a number. They feel like there's 40 to 45 million slaves worldwide, and this is slavery, whether it be labor trafficking or sex trafficking, people held against their will doing what they don't want to do. It's called slavery. 45 million around the world. So it's not a small number. And if we don't act now, we're going to lose this battle, and we're going to lose a whole generation of children.
Which brings my thought process back to taking it personally and taking it seriously. This morning, I had a conversation with my oldest daughter about your book and about having this conversation with you today. And she's 15, and she understands this idea of kidnapping, but not modern day slavery and doing things against your will. And it's elusive to me, Alan, that people don't take it more seriously when they just do the math and learn about these survivors where they're being raped 15, maybe upwards of 25 or more times per day, times every day for a decade. I mean, that's in the 20,000s.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. It's elusive to me. And you brought up the southern border, and with the expiration of Title 42, this makes me really nervous. Where are you with that? Do you have increased stress and anxiety knowing that the proliferation of this could just get bigger?
Yes, but on a good day, I have stress and anxiety around this topic. So I don't know that I have more of it. It's a reality that a good portion of our country is choosing to ignore about the worldwide human trafficking and what's happening at our southern border. Somehow it's turned into some kind of a political volleyball, and I don't want to have the conversations from a political standpoint. I want to have it from a humanitarian standpoint.
Yeah,
there's a humanitarian crisis in our midst, and it's frightening to see what's happening around the world and how it's coming into our country and how it's already here. And I would say this, your daughter's probably a perfect test case for a lot of people see this as a kidnapping, like the appearance is a kidnapping, and that sounds terrible. We've seen it in the movies and on TV shows, and there's a percentage of these victims that are outright kidnapping, like something you see in a movie. But the vast majority is more insidious than that. There's a grooming process. It looks more like a boyfriend is showering her with compliments and jewelry and taking her on dates. And to the naked eye, there's nothing. It looks good from the outside. He has terrible intentions the entire time, but he's grooming her so that it appears to be willingly. It appears to be she's choosing this, all those kinds of things. And that's been historically part of the problem why it's been hard to disrupt it, because people have not understood what's actually happening. A bunch of these kids are coming out of the foster care system. They've already had their family blown up. They've already been abused, neglected, oftentimes sexually abused from a very young age. And in walks in this knight in shining armor, if you will. He's saying the things she's always wanted to hear. He's taking care of her. They form a relationship. Now they have a mutual conversation. We have to make some money so we can really, get out of here and buy a house and, live the American dream, if you will. And he springs this idea. She may not object right away because she loves him. And he's the only one that's ever taken care of her and loved her back. And if she does push back, then it can shift to be incredibly violent and forceful and even lethal. which we've experienced at Saving Innocence. So yeah, the kidnapping, sure, absolutely. Everyone signs off. That's terrible. We teach our sons and daughters, and maybe more our daughters. I remember teaching my daughters a few self-defense moves when she went to college, and bought her a little martial arts weapon to keep, with her. And I was gearing her up for that physical confrontation. And I think we should do some of that for sure. But what's more undetectable is that sort of that sinister approach from these traffickers who are befriending them on social media, who are meeting them in the mall and buying them things and luring them in. And we see that more often than any other version.
Yeah. Sinister, insidious, those are the words that pop into my mind right away. Now, with regard to the groomers, those are the traffickers.
Correct.
And then the victims are self-evident. Now, there's a third category, which are the buyers. Right. What's the makeup of the buyer of commercial sex, particularly with trafficking victims?
Yeah, for sure. And you've just mentioned the three key parts to human trafficking, and as you know, there's a chapters 5, 6, and 7: the buyers, the victims, the traffickers, and we take a kind of a fairly deep dive into each three of those. The buyers, for the most part, are regular guys. In fact, I even talk about that in the book, kind of the regular guy. He oftentimes has a family at home. He oftentimes has a legitimate regular job, and he's gone down this path of fantasy, maybe of addiction, slide in some narcissism, some ego, some power. And for that buyer who is married, oftentimes that buyer has been dabbling or consumed with pornography. He's seen things, become addicted in that nature. He's seen things, he's created fantasies and fetishes that his wife doesn't want to do, doesn't want to be part of. Either he knows he can't bring it up, or he has, and she has said no to whatever that might be. And, he's gone down that path, and suddenly he's left with, in his mind, the option of being in the physical presence of someone that he's paid money for, that he can, quote unquote, have power over and do whatever they want. And then he can leave, no strings attached. That's a regular guy. That's your next door neighbor. That's your dentist. That's the cop. That's the pastor. That's the little league coach. That's the friend that you grew up with. It's not some sleazy guy living in a van down by the river. It's not that guy. Now, some of those guys, yes, but it's mostly the regular guy who's combining that activity with a night out with the boys. He's gone to a basketball game on a Friday night, or a football game, or he's traveling to go to a computer show in Las Vegas or something like that. And for that guy who's in that space, it won't be hard to find an opportunity to purchase somebody for sex. And I would say this, Ed, that part of the goal of the book is to widen that definition, because most people listening right now, or anyone you would talk to, would say, well, I'm not doing that, so I'm good, right? This conversation is not for me. I don't need to read this book because I'm not buying sex, and especially not with a child. That's disgusting. Most guys are in that camp. Got it. Except we have to widen the definition of what commercial sex is. Every guy who is looking at pornography is participating in commercial sex. And that guy might say, well, I don't pay for it. I'm not subscribing to anything. Yeah, but they are monetizing your eyes and your clicks. That's how this world works in modern day advertising. By you simply looking at it, what you're doing is you're feeding this dark beast. You're creating e-commerce for the porn sites. They're getting paid for the sexual abuse of others. Well, yeah, but what if it's not sexual abuse? What if it's two consenting adults? Well, there is a small percentage in pornography that would say, we're consenting adults. This is how we choose to do it. Great. Okay. All right. The problem is the majority of what you see in pornography is not consenting adults. They are manipulated in some way. We talk in the book, there's actually trafficking victims that are trafficked into a pornography site. Remember slavery? They have no choice. They're forced to be there. They film them getting raped, and it shows up in a porn site. And the average knucklehead looking at his tablet after hours, or his phone, or his computer, there's no way of knowing who is there consensually and who is there non-consensually, AKA being raped. You have no way of knowing which one is which. And so you are unknowingly watching and consuming and finding some kind of gratification of watching somebody getting raped. Okay, you're a buyer. You're a consumer of sexual abuse. And this is the hard conversation we have to have whenever we gather with men, because the percentage of men that are consuming pornography is a massive percentage. Guys, if that's you, you can get some help. Guys, if that's you, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I'm telling you, there's people that you're watching that are being raped on the screen right now as you're watching them. Can you possibly sit there one more second and enjoy that? That's the sex buyer. He's going to a strip club. He's enjoying that. That's a sex buyer. He's doing pornography. That's a sex buyer. He's actually going down the dark path of purchasing an adult or a child to have a physical interaction. Of course, that's a sex buyer, but it's much bigger than just that definition. And it's everybody. It's a regular guy. It's a normal guy, quote unquote, normal guy.
And I think that's one of the elements of this that's so disquieting, is that it is the little league coach. It is the finance person that is meeting all other obligations except probably one of the most important would be showing up in his marriage in a really healthy way. What do you think the root cause is for this? Is it turning away from placing God first in marriage that leads the average Joe Blow to go down this road? I mean, I'm sort of stammering at this point. It's like, I know it's not one thing, but if you had to identify like the key things that would allow us to point to root cause, what would you say?
I would say the major contributors. Well, let's before we get to the buyer, the trafficker and the victim are coming from the same places, oftentimes early childhood abuse, oftentimes neglect, oftentimes poverty, the same conditions which create and facilitate the young victim are the same conditions that create and facilitate the young trafficker as a young boy growing up, typically in the inner city. Now that buyer is all types of men. Oftentimes, again, Jessica, my co-author, who, as you mentioned in the opening, survived 10 years of this, she gives her unofficial experiences, official to her, but I mean, they're not documented other than what her experience was per se. But I think she would say 60% of all the buyers she encountered were quote normal white men, Caucasian men. And for those 60%-ish of buyers that are white men, there's a lot of societal issues that white men have grown up in traditionally. They traditionally have a little extra money in their pocket. They traditionally are used to getting what they want. They're traditionally being in a place of privilege and power in our society, in our country. And so for that man who's grown up in those conditions, he's gone down the path of pornography and an over-sexualized culture. The song lyrics that they've grown up with are hideous and demeaning and degrading of women and sexuality. It's just this perfect storm of an over-sexualized culture with entitled, privileged people who have some extra money in their pocket. And there doesn't seem to be anybody saying, don't do this, don't go this way. If a child grows up in a single parent household, the stats are off the chart. It's most likely the father who's missing. So a young man is growing up in a place where there's no trusted older male who's keeping him on the guardrails up, keeping him in check, giving some accountability and instruction. And that perfect storm of going down this over-sexualized culture has created this opportunity. Technology is taken to the next level. It's just really available. You know, a year and a half ago, when the Super Bowl was in LA, I remember the day at my office, and we have a little backyard space. I was having some meetings, and my phone buzzed, and the NFL had just announced who was playing the Super Bowl halftime show when it was in Los Angeles a year and a half ago, last February. And I'm not going to go down that path. You can look up and see who it was. Let's just say a former trafficker was one of the main stars. people that have made millions of dollars, fame and fortune, with songs that demean and degrade sexuality and glamorize sexual abuse of women. Like, these are the people that the National Football League put on their stage, maybe the biggest musical gig in the world every year. And everyone seems to think it's great. I remember I practically threw up in my mouth because that day I had just returned from a funeral of a child. One of our clients that was murdered in such a way that she had experienced sexual abuse up until the last second of her life and the last breath. And in that same day, the National Football League puts on egregious level of sexual abuse glamorizers, if you will. They made a career of celebrating the abuse of women. And so this is the society that our young boys and girls are growing up in. The song lyrics that these guys sing are horrific, many of them.
Yeah.
And if the NFL seems it's like it's okay, and the TV's on in my house, and everyone's kind of like thinking it's okay, that I guess this is all okay. Well, no, I'm here to say that it's not. It's not okay. And I'm too close to it to even for 1 second dismiss it and say that it is okay, because it's absolutely not okay on multiple levels. I needed someone to fight for me, Rachel says. Well, this is part of the fight. I staged a protest. We have people come to our house. I said, just so you know, I'm turning the TV off during the halftime show. I'm sure the NFL is still reeling from the impact that I had on their ratings, because my house did not participate in the Super Bowl halftime show that day.
Yeah.
But you know what? It starts small. You make a statement to the people around you, your friends, your children in your home, and then people start thinking and living a little differently, is my hope.
Yeah. Given the nature of your work, how are you able to sleep at night? I mean, because I'm not in front of this every day. And I mentioned near the beginning of this conversation that it took me days and days to get through your book, because the content was just really just heavy and you know, how are you able to do this work in the face of pure evil and get any type of peace or rest?
I get asked that from time to time. I think there's a calling. I think God plucked me out of someplace else that was comfortable and known for me my entire life, and put me in some place that I was uncomfortable and unknown. And so I do feel like I'm here on purpose. That's part of it. The other part is I've gotten to know some of these amazing survivors, and there's 5 or 6 of them featured in the book that contribute quite a bit that you read. Jessica's one of them. Jessica's become like a family member to our family. And there's others. One of the other amazing young women, it was her birthday yesterday, and there was lots of love, back and forth, texting each other and all that kind of stuff. I've gotten to know these amazing survivors, and I don't know if this is an answer that a therapist would approve of, but there's some perspective here as well. Yeah, like I'll lose a night of sleep here and there because of what's in front of me in this work. But I actually know for a fact, and you can attest after reading the book, my worst day would be the best day that they ever have. And they live their terrible existence every single day, 24/7. And so there's part of me that says, if they can do it, I can do it. And I almost don't give this is a part where the therapist might not like my perspective on this. I almost feel like I don't deserve, or I don't know what the right words are. Like how can I possibly feel terrible about my place in this work when I'm working so close with people that have actually lived it in a horrific way? I think there's a healthy side of that I can keep perspective, I guess is what I'm saying. And sure, every once in a while I lose some sleep too. But there's a resolve and a calling to keep plugging along. And
Yeah.
and we have fun. I on purpose in Saving Innocence, we have as much fun as we can, and I'm always involving with our staff, some kind of a little game and win a gift card if you do a trivia I mean, we're just kind of having fun. That's probably some of my Young Life background. Young Life is an organization that likes to have fun and not take themselves too seriously, and so I bring that DNA into an ordinarily otherwise high intensity, stressful environment. We laugh a lot. We have some fun. In the middle of tragedy, we certainly take that seriously. But that's maybe a longer answer to how I sleep at night. Sometimes I sleep mostly, but sometimes I don't, and that's just the way it is.
It's a really clear perspective. I really like how you said that your worst day is akin to their best day, and it's probably not even a one-to-one.
No.
When we really think about it. One of the things that struck me in reading the biographies of the survivors that are in the book is the majority of them talked about their relationship with God. And admittedly, that's somewhat surprising, considering they have every reason to take the perspective that God left them alone. God was nowhere to be found. God wasn't coming to the rescue. And yet, whenever you read their stories, they point to Him. Like, so with the relationships that you've had a chance to build, where does that strength come from, and where does that perspective come from on their behalf?
That's a great question, and I would say there is a lifetime healing journey that they are on, and most of the survivors that I've gotten to know would say those exact words: "Where was God? I felt far from God." And then those that would then, in their journey, would come back, and many of them, and say that He was with me the whole time, and He's what got me. He's why I'm still alive. He provided a way of escape. They would begin to see the positive side, and but very well justified, to your point. And I might have a few questions when I see God one day, and it's yeah. I mean, why is this happening? That whole free will thing and sin and broken world. I mean, you either believe it or you don't. And if there's going to be free will and free choice for humans to live how they want, you got to take the good with the bad, I guess. I would refer you, actually, I don't know if you've been to the Saving Innocence website, savinginnocence.org. And Ori is her name. She's the one who I mentioned who just had her birthday yesterday. She contributed in the book quite a bit. And she goes on the record. There's a video, about a 7 or 8 minute video of her telling her experiences. She was on our staff at Saving Innocence for a number of years. And she talks about that very thing. Through tears in her eyes, saying, where was God? Where was He? And then she kind of resolves that in the video. So I would encourage all your listeners to go to savinginnocence.org. Right on the homepage, and a little slider, there's a video of Ori having that same conversation.
It's an extraordinarily powerful video. I watched that multiple times.
Great.
For when I think about the cultural dynamics, and for the last 40 years, there's been an attack on masculinity, and we men are faced now with, if we show up aggressive or as protectors or providers or as gladiators, we're viewed as toxic. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you called out in the book is that the role of authentic masculinity. How do you differentiate between the current perception, and it's not held by the majority, I don't believe, but it's held by those that are really vocal about it, particularly like news media. How do you differentiate this idea that masculinity is inherently toxic with showing up in a more authentic way?
Yeah, I think one of the great lies that's being forwarded right now, one of them, is that any masculinity is therefore toxic masculinity. And there are certainly some toxic, poisonous versions of masculinity, which have been displayed in full splendor on social media and the news and through sports and politicians and regular people. My call as part of the book is, and I actually state this in the beginning, I say we're going to use human trafficking as the worst example of men gone wrong, but my goal is actually higher than that. My goal is to talk to the heart and the soul of men, encourage and inspire and challenge men to live differently. And then in that process, we'll fix human trafficking and a lot of other of our societal ills, because most problems are caused by men. I saw a little meme somewhere. I don't know if it's an actual thing or just a joke. It sounds pretty real. And it said 80% of all problems are caused by men. And I laughed, and then I quit laughing. I thought, that's probably right. Yeah, it might be a little low, actually. Like, can you think of a significant problem in our society or around the world that there aren't some egotistical, narcissistic, power-hungry men behind it? And so my challenge is for all men to not go down the path of the counterfeit version. If I'm going to use authentic masculinity, that must suggest that there's an inauthentic version. And I believe that that's what we're seeing played out in our society right now. There's an inauthentic, a counterfeit version, a cheapened and a diminished version of masculinity. And that version is running amok and causing problems. And it's throwing the rest of us under the bus. It's throwing the rest of us good men who are trying to do the right thing and be the right guy. It's making us question our intentions. It's making us question, well, wait a minute. Should I be strong or should I be weak? What should I be? Because it feels like weak men, in my opinion, are the source of the problems that we're seeing in society and culture and the world. Weak men. So we need strong men to confront them. A strong man who's not toxic. And chapter 4 of the book, I break it down. We have 4 pillars of masculinity, that a little thing I did with my son and some good friends and their sons as they were growing up. And we can talk about that if you want, but there are 4 pillars of authentic. Here's what it means to be a real man. What does it mean? There's no agreed upon definition. Is it an age? Does that make you a man? The first time you had sex? Oh, now you're a man. You graduated something. Are you a man now? Nope, nobody knows. And so I'm humbly suggesting, I know the answer to that question. And we can negotiate, and you can add something if you want or take something away. But the point is, what are we aiming for? What are we teaching our boys? What's the finish line? You never, ever, ever start a race, like an actual race, not knowing how far you're running. Is it a 100-yard dash? Is it a 26-mile marathon? Those are different races. Where's the finish line? Well, this race of life, of becoming a man and living like a man, what's our target? What are we doing? And we're doing our boys a disservice if we don't spell that out. And if we get enough men living as authentic, healthy, powerful men, this world's going to be in much better shape than it is right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know if this would surprise you, but the number one objection I've received to invitations to be on this podcast by strong, principled Christian men is they don't value their story of having shown up authentically throughout the course of their life. I mean, obviously they had challenges. They probably had trials that took them off course. I totally get it. But more often than not, that these guys are exactly what you're describing. And they don't feel that that has enough oomph to come on a podcast and talk about. And that's antithetical to how I think about it, because those are the stories that we need more of. Do you agree with that idea?
Well, absolutely. And I quote a good friend of mine in the book. He's been a Secret Service agent for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years at this point. And he said something really interesting to me. You know, when the Secret Service isn't doing the job we all think they do all the time, which is guarding, important people, kind of their day job, if you will, is breaking up and disrupting counterfeit currency rings. That's what the Secret Service does when they're not, talking into their sleeve, protecting a president or something. And he said, here's how we do our work. Here's how we train. We spend 90% of our time in our training studying the real thing, the authentic bill. And then he said, that allows us to spot the counterfeit a mile away. I thought, wow, that's profound. Say that again. Let me think about that. And so as part of, I think, our responsibility and this podcast and my book and whatever, we have to get as many authentic, truly authentic, the real thing in front of the public eye for consumption. Like, oh, that's what it looks like. And it starts at home with your son. He desperately needs to know what a real man is and what he isn't, because the rest of the world is feeding him lies all day long about what a real man is. And your daughter desperately needs to know what a healthy, strong man is, because that calibrates her for what she can expect and what she's looking for in a future boyfriend. You know, your 15-year-old, I don't know, you know, where she is and what she's doing, but I bet in the next several years, if not already, you know, she'll have a significant relationship, and she's going to measure that against you.
That's right.
Pressure? No, I say it's what a privilege.
What a
and
compliment.
if we can put authentic, strong, healthy men and let people see this is how it works, we have to push against this tidal wave of inauthentic, counterfeit, cheapened versions that are out to take, not out to give. I have a friend in the back of the book when I have about 8 or 9 of my good buddies kind of all talk about a couple paragraphs of each guy about how do they define authentic masculinity. I'm putting as many examples of the real thing in front of anyone who read this book and elsewhere. And he said something really interesting. He said, when a man takes, he loses all credibility. Like he said, like a real man, an authentic man, he's there to serve and to give. I said, absolutely. When we go in there to whatever that might be, and we're taking something for ourselves, like we're here to take, nope. That's not what a man does. He gives, he serves. There's a lot to unpack there for sure.
No doubt about it. Well, the title of your book, Men Fight for Me, The Role of Authentic Masculinity in Ending Sexual Exploitation and Trafficking. Recommend everyone pick this up, male or female. It's incredibly powerful. And if you're willing to look at it, Alan, I often say that once we recognize something in us or a situation or something else, and we're compelled at that point to do something about it. And I'm happy to join you in this fight. For the listeners, how can they learn more about you and your work and get involved?
Thank you. Go to 2 different websites. Go to fightforme.net. It's a little website we created around this book. You can buy the book there. It's for sale on Amazon. You go right there. But take one more step. Go to fightforme.net. There's biographies of all these amazing survivors. Some of them have written books. There's other things to look at and consume there. And so fightforme.net will help you lean forward. There's a little newsletter you can sign up for. And then go to savinginnocence.org. And that's where I work. And I'm executive director at savinginnocence.org. Follow us on social media. Just be part of the conversation. And there's 5 or 6 videos on savinginnocence.org. Fightforme.net. There's a YouTube channel connected to it. There's little videos, little conversations like this that have happened there. You can really take a deep dive of just, okay, I got to learn more about this. Go to those 2 places. Follow us on social media. Be part of the conversation. And you can email me directly. You can find me I'm sure you can find an email on Saving Innocence, but if you go to fightforme.net, there's a personal email connected there. You can contact me. I had a guy in Florida read the book, was impacted like you, and he's like, what can I do? And he sends me an email. So we've been talking back and forth for a few months now, and I'm pointing him to some direct things to do in Florida. And so I'm happy to be part of this conversation. This is what I'm doing in this part of my life. Would love to talk with anyone who is willing to have a conversation. Yeah.
Your work is inspiring, no doubt about it. And the Lord has his hand on you, and I have no doubt will continue blessing you on this journey. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Before we wrap, would you mind praying us out?
Oh, no, I'd be happy to. Thank you so much. God, thank you for all that you have in front of us. And I pray for all these listeners right now that you would speak to their heart, that you would whisper to them or scream at them and challenge men across this globe to step up, live in a powerful way, in a healthy way, and that there would be no more victims of human trafficking. That this conversation and books like this and podcasts like this would have to find something else to write about, because it would be a thing of the past. So we ask in Jesus' name that you would do that. And we are humbly here to be used by you in any way that you wish. Thanks for Ed and this podcast, his willingness to use this platform. And thank you, God, for all that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. God bless you, brother. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I know this is, as I think at the end of Casablanca, this is the start of a beautiful friendship.
I don't know if I ever saw that movie, but either way, let's stay in touch for sure. I love it.
Definitely. It's not as action packed as Gladiator, but it's
right.
worthwhile. So you put it on your list.
Yeah, okay. All right. We'll do. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Alan.
Yeah, thank you.
You can contact the show at itsnotmycredittotake.com. We'd love to hear from you. God bless.